Hey world, Dan Brown here. Okay, so in my 15 or so years on the internet, I've gone from bright-eyed and bushy-tailed, all excited about the way that it's going to change the world for the better, to as cynical as a bridge troll about just, the effect that it's had on the world. Right? Interconnectivity's initial promise was that it would be this panacea for empathy on an international scale. Everyone would start seeing the world from everyone else's perspective, and we'd understand that, people in Bangladesh and people in China and people in the United States and people in sub-Saharan Africa all have a basic common humanity, and even though we have different lives, we should be thinking about each other and caring about each other and holding hands and singing Kumbaya and ushering in the age of Aquarius. Obviously, that is not quite what the situation is right now, at the very least. Who knows? We're very early in this whole internet thing, but that initial optimism has given way to a kind of hall of mirrors, a distorting hall of, looking at people who look similar to ourselves and share views similar to our own. Rather than being exposed to new ideas, we tend to, automatically, maybe subconsciously, surround ourselves with people and ideas that already reflect what we want to believe about the world, right? Rather than empathy, social media, it seems, promotes tribalism, right? Our networks consist mostly of people who look and feel and think like us. This is a New York Times interactive map. I'll put a link in the description where you can drag your cursor over every county in the United States, and it will show you where people who live in that county are likely to have their Facebook network geographically located. And the common thread here is that people's Facebook networks tend to be full of people who live pretty much in their same state, in their same region, not too far from, where they personally live. And, this might seem a little bit like a, well, duh sort of a thing. And, people are friends with the people that they know in real life and who live close to them. Okay, that makes some sense. But if you consider that the internet emerged into the public consciousness riding this steed known as globalism, it's a little bit ironic that the most profound effect that new networking technologies have had on our day-to-day life isn't that we now all work for companies that are spread all across the world and have, video conferences every day with people in Egypt. We can do stuff like that, obviously, but it's a little bit of a flying car moment. It's hard to predict exactly how we will grow into new technologies, right? Where in the early 1900s, people were predicting we'd be driving flying cars by now. Right now, it might seem obvious why we don't do that, because it would be very dangerous. People would die, but it wasn't so obvious back then. People were enchanted by the potential of the technology that they didn't think of, more obvious things. And that's what's going on with this. It's hard to predict the future, right? But it's still hard to predict the future. We are still very much establishing social norms for the internet, right? Those norms are developing and changing. Like I said, it takes decades for cultures to grow into new paradigms, into new epochs. Most people watching this, I have to assume, most people about my age probably grew up with the internet, right? But many of our parents and their parents are only now just beginning to join social media platforms. They're beginning to build out their own online personas, presences, their own norms for existing in these cyber spaces. And before the 2016 election, in the run-up to the 2016 election, it felt as though we were having a kind of wholesome intergenerational moment. There's no start date, when it began happening, but we were definitely in the middle of, children introducing parents, ushering them into the digital world. It makes sense that we were gradually, subtly growing to trust these online platforms as safe spaces for family and friends and neighbors and loved ones. But, as we know now, that feeling was also pretty naive. A little bit naive at the very least. Right here, this is a building. It's a picture of a building. It's Russia's Internet Research Agency. This is ground zero for where Vladimir Putin catfished I mean, basically all of the United States of America to have his way with the 2016 presidential election. One factor among many, but an important factor I want to talk about here for a minute. Some anonymous whistleblower who worked for the Internet Research Agency from 2013 until 2015 said that young people, mostly late 20s, early 30s, internet savvy, Russian citizens, were paid $1,400 a week. Okay, that comes out to like $70,000 a year in Russia, no less, where there is an ongoing economic crisis. Like, that's a great salary here. That money goes a lot farther there. And, in the middle of an economic crisis, I mean, who's going to say no? That's great money. That is great money to sit on a computer all day and just troll. Okay, there were specialized departments, highly specialized departments managing, every employee managed dozens of fake sock puppet accounts each, maybe hundreds of those sock puppet accounts each, to influence online conversations all over the world. Like, they're not just limiting their influence to the United States, although that seemed to be where much of their focus was in 2016 at the very least. They also churn out more traditional propaganda and use armies of bots to make sure that they can manipulate the algorithms of different social media sites to make sure that that propaganda reaches a wide audience. And according to this whistleblower, in 2013, when he first started, there were a few dozen employees, and then in 2015, by the time he had left, there were over 1,000. We don't even know how many employees they had in 2016 and how many they continued to have today. We know that Russian efforts to influence American politics and global politics continue. They continue until right now, and it's a whole secretive operation. We don't know all the details about it, but I want you to think, all right, for a minute, like, how much havoc could you wreak if your full-time job, without even any sock puppet accounts or bot armies, just you with your own accounts, if your job was to go cause havoc on the internet all day, every day, and you were being paid $70,000 to do it, like, how much could you do? Right? If you had dozens of fake accounts, how much could you do? If you had bot armies blowing wind into the sails of your efforts, like, how much reach would you have? If you had an office building with thousands of coworkers you could chat over the water cooler with about best practices and big fish stories, like, what kind of a culture would that create within the office that would allow you to, create a culture oceans away that might be increasingly toxic and at each other's throats and contributing to the geopolitical ends of Vladimir Putin, right? It's a truism that small groups of dedicated revolutionaries can change the world. What do you think thousands of well-paid by the Russian state operatives can do, right? What do you think? We've already seen it. We've seen what they can accomplish. The most tangible influence campaign that we know the most about is pretty traditional propaganda in the form of image macros. The Internet Research Agency bought big ad buys on Facebook, on Instagram, with images like this that are designed to be shared by your angry uncle on Facebook. I mean, liberals were targeted too. Bernie Sanders was used to pit Democrats against each other during the primary process. It's a whole complicated psyops operation. It's freaky. It's scary. These are designed to be shared. They're designed to start flame wars on individual people's, Facebook threads, Facebook pages, and designed to get people hot under the collar. More than engaging with Americans directly, Russian trolls were concerned with distorting the contours, still are, distorting the contours of our political discussion, right? If you see enough crap like this that's designed to be divisive, designed to poke us on hot button issues, eventually rational debate and conversation just gives way to all caps shouting matches, and that leads to bad decisions and to fractures in families and tearing apart the fabric of the community of Americans that Ronald Reagan so desperately and dramatically maybe overstated, but that's a different topic for a different time, right? The idea is that this will ultimately lead to the decline of the United States, creating a vacuum for Russian empire to fill and have greater influence on the global scene. Image macros will just scratch the surface. We don't know. Like I said, we don't know the full details of the secret influence campaign. We just know that it's a real thing. It's kind of like knowing that your house is haunted, but you don't know exactly what objects are possessed or where or why the ghosts do anything at all. It's like the goalposts are constantly moving. The more we learn, the more that they change what their tactics happen to be. And people are very sensitive about the content and ideas that they publish on the internet. So it's very easy for people who engage with those content creators and idea sharers who aren't engaging on the level to manipulate their feelings to shape the landscape for discourse. At the same time, it's also easy for them to kind of artificially inflate, blow wind into the sails of the most toxic, divisive communities that maybe serve their long-term geopolitical ends. All right, next slide. Boop. Next slide. No, go. Come on. Hook. There it is. All right. How much time do you think it would take for one employee of the Internet Research Agency in their, YouTube division to, be assigned to my YouTube presence specifically, right? How much of their work week, how many minutes would it take if they have my account flagged to just go through and check all the new stuff that I've published and new things that I've commented on and just make sure they're able to pepper in a few seeds of doubt, make me self-conscious about what I've created and what I've shared, and make sure that the conversation in the comments section, maybe they don't throw it entirely off course, but throw a little bit of a divisive tangent in there, try to keep us distracted and make sure we just generally feel a little bit worse about ourselves than we maybe on average should or would without their presence. Probably you could do that in 15 minutes a week. One employee could be assigned to hundreds of outspoken liberals on the internet with small to medium-sized audiences, but that adds up, right? If you target creators with 2,000 viewers here, 2,000 viewers here, 2,000 viewers here, eventually you create a culture where we feel bad about sharing our ideas out there. It's not that hard to do. It's not that hard to plant a seed of self-doubt in the minds of people creating content, because this is hard. We're putting our real selves out there, and you're sensitive, right? At the same time, I think it's even easier to lift the spirits of toxic places like The Donald or any number of disgusting right-wing YouTubers that I'm sure what their big punchable faces look like. If you use a bot army or sock puppet account to just be great job, great video, lots of extra upvotes and thumbs ups and likes and views, obviously online platforms are doing their best, as they claim anyway. They're doing their best to try to beat that back, but you're always going to be one step behind the trolls, right? There are a million different ways that you can try to game algorithms where, every time one of these ways you figure out how it's being done, you can put a band-aid over it, but they're just going to move on to the next innovative way to try to game the algorithms and make sure that right-wing YouTubers have an easy time finding an audience and, having a community that seems engaged and interested and it's fun to be a part of. At the same time, it's not that hard to kind of dampen the spirits of more progressive communities. And I don't know for a fact that they are doing that or that's a stated goal, but it stands to reason. It would make a lot of sense if you got an office building full of trolls to try and make it seem more fun to be the side of the political spectrum that you want to see take power, because in the long run you think that will lead to the decline of American empire. Not that I love American empire, but we'll get to that in a second. I look like a crazy person if I just pick any comment or any commenter and I'm like, you're a Russian troll. But at the same time, we'd be naive to engage in conversations in public spaces of the internet and just take every comment at face value. After 2016, that should be obvious. There are all sorts of interests, not just Russia, trying to mess with the way that we think, distort our perception of reality to one that serves whatever they're trying to peddle better and better and better. As we continue here, you and me, POGOBAT viewers and Dan Brown here, as we continue to build this space for engaging with each other and wrestling with big ideas about what's wrong with the world and how we might fix it, how we might move the needle. In the same way that my very first video, returning to this sort of format, had to be Nanette so that you could understand better where I'm coming from and where I'm not coming from. This also is kind of like a prerequisite, a video I have to make, a topic that has to be brought up because, the trolls are among us, right? Those who are not engaging in earnest are in the comment section of this video
right now. It's an elephant in the room. And whenever I've been making content seriously on YouTube, like the feedback loop between audience and creator, has always been integral to what I'm trying to do. But what I've learned recently is that feedback loop is corruptible. And so I want to try to figure out how to make it as least corruptible as possible. But brief aside before the sweeping conclusion, to be clear, I do think that the mainstream media's like laser focus on Russia paints an incomplete picture. I think that Russia is a convenient scapegoat that obfuscates the mainstream media's culpability in the rise of Trump and the fall of America that we are living through right now. Like Putin is a convenient framing device, right? He represents Russian Empire, multiple oceans away. And so if, in the public consciousness, the biggest boogeyman, the biggest threat is this, Russian Empire, the natural foil, without articulating it necessarily, just leave it to implication. The natural foil to that is American Empire. Like I said, I don't love American Empire. There's a lot wrong with what we have going on at home here that contributes to, blistering inequality, and ultimately the end game is we all die because of the cascading catastrophes of climate change, because the powers that be supporting American Empire, are older than we are and won't be around by then, or have like bunkers like I was talking about in my climate video. Focusing on Russia means that we're not focusing on that. If we're scared about a problem an ocean away, then we cling to the status quo at home that, the media lies to us by saying can protect us from these evil Russian forces. I mean, they are evil. Vladimir Putin is an evil man who does not care about, the dignity of human lives. Many people have died because of his conquests. But, if we only focus on the Russia angle, we're missing equally important angles here at home. And also, don't think for a minute that these dudes aren't looking at what Vladimir Putin and the Internet Research Agency accomplished in 2016. Don't think for a minute that they're not thinking to themselves, like, how can we leverage these tactics to further our ends here at home? Like, it might not be as subversive as trying to cause the entire country to, like, turn against itself. But, I mean, I guess it kind of is. Like, they're trying to make the poor turn against themselves so that we don't turn against them. But really, that's what we should be. We should be turning against the billionaires right about now. Right about time to maybe think about the revolution, regardless of where tomorrow's trolls come from, whether they're from Russia or whether they're from billionaires or corporations here. Maybe China could get into the game. They probably already have. They're making plenty of dissidents disappear. Regardless of where they come from, as we try to speak truth to power, okay, they're gonna notice us. They're going to try to mess with us. They're going to try to make sure that what we're doing here is soul-crushing and unfun. Meanwhile, blowing wind in the sails of assholes like Steven Crowder. Like, I just started making videos again. We're in the early stages of establishing what our norms are here, what our values are here, what our footing is, and I'm curious. My call to action, the comment I want you to leave below or send me in an email, danbrownuniverse@gmail.com, is, how do we establish our footing? What values can we hold? Like, what stylistic choices should I be making to mitigate the effectiveness of the trolls? I'm thinking like big picture stuff, like values level stuff as we reestablish this community, norms for our discourse here. How do we root out the voices of the trolls? How do we, I don't know. Do we try to use sunlight as the best disinfectant and call out people we think are trolls? Do we try to like just speak at such a high level of discourse that whatever language barrier exists becomes difficult? Like outside of the box ideas, specific ideas, big picture ideas, whatever it may be. How do we fight? How do we beat back the trolls?